Gita's philosophy was not something that was originally created by Krishna.
He even quotes the Upanishads in some situations.
Yeah,
He directly quotes them. He draws images from the Upanishads, and I believe there's even a chapter called Sankhya Yoga. Draupadi is herself a somewhat exceptional or mystically inflected character. Okay, so her name is Krishna. She has a mysterious relationship to Krishna. She emerges fully formed from the fire. She has a very strange color combination in Vyasa. Her skin is completely black and her hair is blue. She's distinctly described as being something almost supernatural.
It's been written that Bhim was her favorite lover. He was very passionate and he was very fond of her. I feel Mahabharat as a text is very sexually explicit. It's very open, it's very accepting. We all know how Pandavas were born. They were not the sons of Pandu. In today's episode of Discovery of an Author, we discuss the subject and topic of Mahabharata based on the author Amit Majumdar's book. Actually, it is a trilogy based on Mahabharat, and it is divided into 3 volumes. Now, we discussed Mahabharat based on a book so that the information that we share with you is authentic. And this also ensures that whatever knowledge and discussions that we are having on the topic of Mahabharat is authentic, and we do not give you any false informations. If you guys do decide to listen or watch to this episode in its entirety, then this is what you will learn or gain from this particular episode. You would understand the authenticity of Mahabharat, whether it's history, whether it's a poetry, whether it is mythology or something else. You will also understand that if texts like Mahabharata and Ramayana were transmitted orally, then what is the guarantee that the versions that we have today are authentic and genuine? You will also understand the importance of reading Mahabharata in today's day and age, in the era of artificial intelligence and technology. Why should anyone even think about reading the Mahabharata? You will also get to know about some of the key pivotal moments that happened in the Mahabharata, like why Kunti asked Draupadi to marry 5 men, and how did that dynamics unfold? Why, when Draupadi was getting disrobed in front of her 5 husbands, they did nothing? And why Krishna chose Arjuna during the battle to explain and give him the knowledge of Gita? These are some of the amazing things that you will get to know if you decide to listen to this episode. And if you find value in this episode, please do share it with your friends and family who will benefit from the knowledge that we're sharing. And it is my request that please like and subscribe to our episode if you're liking the kind of content and the authentic information that we're bringing out to you. Enjoy this episode. Thank you so much. So, Amit, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
All good, all good. Really pumped and excited for this specific episode. And this topic is incredible. And, I must give you a compliment. I absolutely love the covers of all of your books.
Yeah, that's a compliment to Penguin India.
Yeah,
They did a wonderful job.
it's incredible. It's subtle. I really like, that each trilogy has a specific color scheme going on. You have the red,
Yeah.
the blue, and the yellow. Incredible. I mean, I personally believe that you should judge a book by its cover.
Definitely, I think that if people judge these books by their cover, they won't go wrong. They'll have a nice positive opinion of it. So that's good.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I was familiar with your books. And then when Penguin shared your profile, I was really happy because I actually was trying to reach out to you, but I was not able to find your email ID anywhere or a direct contact because I wanted to speak with you on your book on Sita. Basically, that's Ramayana from the point of view of because that's a very important again a very important text. Ramayana as such is a very important text, and the problem with the the epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata,
Yeah.
Specifically, when you are, I live in India, right? I come from a Hindu family. Uh, Dashera is just nearing, and Diwali is
Mhm.
about to happen. Over here, these two epics, though, are very sensitive, but
Mhm.
I feel they are highly misunderstood.
Mhm.
Because I feel, Amit, and of course, we're going to discuss this thing as well, that
Yeah.
in India, we have associated Ramayana and Mahabharat only with religion.
Mhm.
Now, it can be a good thing, but I think there are certain negatives as well when you combine a epic solely and bind it with
Mhm.
religion. Then that becomes a very tricky ground, because then you're not able to have open discussions.
Mhm.
Because if something is religious, it kind of becomes taboo to question it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then because people's faith comes into the picture, ki, oh, how can you,
Right.
that's the problem what I feel I see in Mahabharata and Ramayana.
No, I think that the best way to go about it and the best way to approach it is the way in which it is approached within the epic itself, right? So the interesting thing about both epics is that they contain criticisms of the avatars within it. So at the end of the Ramayana, as everyone knows, at the end of the Yuddhakand, uh, Rama has just slain Ravana and he has Sita brought to him. And then he harangues her and he says, you can go wherever you want. I did what I had to do. And everyone around Rama is appalled that he says this, right? He almost has he's in a state of almost PTSD at that point. It's very out of character. But you realize that it has a much larger function in the story, which is that A, it shows that Rama is human and vulnerable in his avatar form, and B, it provides the opportunity for Rama in Valmiki Ramayana to finally understand who he is and why he was sent, or why he was taken birth. And so at that moment, after all of the people around him, including Lakshman, Hanuman, everybody is appalled at what Rama has just said. The skies open up, Agni, Brahma, everyone comes down, and then Brahma tells Rama, and he says, "Don't you know who you are?" And Rama says, "I think I'm the son of Dashrath. You tell me who I am." And so then Brahma does tell him who he is. And he says, "You are Vishnu, you are this, you are that, you are the other." And similarly, in the Mahabharata, to bring it back to the Mahabharata, that includes extensive critiques of Krishna, because at this point, there's the inflection point into the Kali Yuga. And at that point, Dharma needs to have sort of, Ramayana takes place much earlier in the Satyuga. This is at the inflection point where from now on you have to play dirty to do good in the world. And Krishna is the one who comes in as the avatar who says, "Hey, look, sometimes you have to hit the other guy below the belt, literally below the belt." That's why Duryodhana's thighs are broken by Bhim in the final Gada fight, right? Other times he advocates certain things that are against the ancient warrior code. Hey, look, other times at one point he even offers to break his own vow not to take up arms if Arjuna doesn't kill Bhishma. I'm going to do it. I'm going to break my own vow and do it because it's that necessary. It's that important. And all of those things lead to criticism of Krishna in the epic itself. At the very end, after the war, Queen Gandhari, she curses Krishna, and she says, "You played dirty. You did this. You're the reason I lost all my children, and it's going to come back to you." And Krishna accepts it. And sure enough, later on, his entire clan ends up engaging in mutual self-slaughter. And this is also a much larger point that's being made, a larger point that's being made, that it's almost as though it's saying nobody is immune to karma.
Yeah.
Nobody is immune to karma, right? And that's a law. That's a law that you're not gonna sweet talk your way out of, no matter how charming you are. And Krishna is as charming as they come. So I agree with you that I think modern Indians they do have a they tend to be a little touchy about religious subjects.
आई एम सो सॉरी फॉर द सडन इंटरप्शन. ये हमें करना पड़ता है और हमको इसी प्रकार से इंटरप्ट करना पड़ता है. बट आई हैव अ रिक्वेस्ट कि गाइज, अगर आपको थोड़ी भी वैल्यू लग रही है in what we are providing with our podcast, in the kind of content that we are creating, and in the kind of people that we are bringing on our show, please subscribe to our channel. This is the only way in which any podcast on YouTube can grow. It will cost you nothing. आपने सिर्फ सब्सक्राइब करना है. And trust me guys, if you subscribe to this podcast, we'll make sure that we continue delivering you such amazing कंटेंट, इंटेलिजेंट कंटेंट. हम एक इंटेलिजेंट पॉडकास्ट क्रिएट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. दैट इज वाई हमारे जितने भी गेस्ट होते हैं वो सारे पब्लिश ऑथर्स होते हैं जिनका वर्क के देयर इज अ बैकिंग टू देयर वर्क. कोई भी कुछ ऐसे नहीं बोल रहा. सो गाइस, प्लीज सब्सक्राइब टू आवर चैनल एंड कंटिन्यू एंजॉइंग एंड लिसनिंग टू दिस एपिसोड. सो yesterday I did something that I never thought I'll do. Me and my friend, we went to PVR to see a anime in hall. We used to see anime in TVs and everything. You know, in India, anime in theater. There's this very famous anime, a Japanese anime called Demon Slayer. Now, Demon Slayer is the rage right now. I mean, because Japanese storytelling is
Yeah.
something else. They have mastered the craft of emotions.
Right.
Now, Demon Slayer is about two forces. You have a demonic forces. That's why the demons. And the ones who slay them, they are called the Hashiras. So that's why Demon Slayer. So it's a fight between good and evil. That entire movie and the series is so philosophical. It's so deep. Even the demons have human sides. See, because Japan is highly influenced by Buddhism, the dharmic religions do not function in the Abrahamic way, ki good or bad. Good and bad, nothing else. So dharmic religions work in a very different way. The good can have bad, the bad can have good. There is gray area, there is no distinction. It merges. Right. Similar philosophies of Japan, because Buddhism was the primary religion over there. So that their philosophy is derived a lot from Buddhism. So in Demon Slayer, the demons also have a human side. The demon slayers, who are the heroes, they also have demonic sides. So there is no good or bad. There's deep philosophy, there is deep emotion, there is deep learnings from an anime. But I know it's an anime. I know it's not something which is tied to their religion that I have to follow or I have to read. I know it's not historical text that they have converted into animation. Oh, this is how it happened. It must be true. I know it's a work of literary creativity. Somebody must have written it first. It's literature. Yet it has great learnings. So for anybody to get great learnings, is not important that it must come from religious belt or it must come a historic belt. It can also come from a pop culture belt. It can come also from just literature, right? It doesn't happen to be. Now my problem, my doubt with Mahabharata is that, is it a religious text like the Vedas? Is it a historical text as an itihasa, as it happened? Or it is just a poetry? Because the creator is a poet. It's a poem. So this is something that I have not understood. How should I approach this text? Like a religious text? Like a historic text? Or like a work of literary fiction or poem? Or it's all of three? Or is it some different category? So first, I want you to demystify the fundamental. How should I categorize this text?
So I think that you mentioned three categories, right? And I think that the ancient epics, whether it's the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Iliad, things like that, they have characteristics of all three of those things, all three of those things. And rather than try and slot it into one or the other, or one and not the other two, because that is not going to work, because of the nature of the past in which those particular distinctions were fuzzy to say the least. And the 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 Mahabharata itself contains elements of history. It's like, Gandhara was an actual kingdom in the Northwest. All of the kingdoms mentioned in the Mahabharata, those were historical kingdoms that really existed. There probably was a massive war, of some kind, in the past. And so, similarly, the Ramayana, Ayodhya really existed. That particular lineage of kings really existed in history, in historical time. Simultaneously, you have the religious text aspect of it, where the Mahabharata specifically has the Gita embedded in it, but the epics themselves have a sacred character because they recount the exploits of an avatar of Vishnu in each case. They themselves, the texts themselves, because they're so ancient, and they are generally characterized as smriti texts as opposed to shruti texts. So shruti texts are, it's almost like they're overheard from the beyond. Smriti texts are remembered. They are of technically a lower intensity of sanctity, but they are still, sacred, and they are worthy of remembering. So they do have a religious character as well. The Gita in particular has been elevated to the status of an Upanishad ever since Shankaracharya declared it an Upanishad. So that particular segment of the Mahabharata, the Gita, has this extra character where it's almost retrospectively declared a Shruti. But the Mahabharata itself has this hallowed character. And then as far as poetic invention is concerned, there are beautiful supernatural sequences in the epic that I think that most people would not necessarily believe really happened in real life, quote unquote. At the end, I know my favorite such sequence is at the end, after the war, Vyasa goes under the water and he projects this vision of all of the dead soldiers, all of the dead Kauravas and other soldiers from both sides of the war, and they're all shaking hands and hugging each other, and they're all reconciled in death. And he even gives the blind king Dhritarashtra a vision for this brief moment so that he can see his own sons reconciled in death. It's a beautiful moment. Now, do I think that quote unquote really happened? No, I don't think that really happened. I think that is a poetic
liberty.
interpolation, a poetic sequence, invented sequence, fantasy sequence, placed in the context of something that is simultaneously religious, historical, and poetic. And I think that the work gains its power from being a hybrid of all these things that you mentioned.
So basically, when somebody so basically poetic liberty exists, and when you're talking about poetic liberty, it can be exaggerated, it can be something that is imaginative, it can be something which might have elements of the metaphysical realm, and
Sure,
that
absolutely.
is
And to be honest with you, even contemporary historical books often have poetic license built into them as far as how different characters from history are framed or presented to us, right? And so I would argue that even conventional historiography in its 21st century European or post-Western way of writing history is itself hybridized with a certain amount of myth making.
so basically it is based upon historical events.
I think so. I absolutely think so.
And there could be someone similar to Krishna with a different name, but it is based on someone who could have that traits. Maybe the name would have been different.
I think that Krishna was often, I think it was called Vasudev back. There's a lot of the earliest references to him are with that name. But yeah, Krishna is a reference to his dark skin color.
Dark skin color. So how do you something very important? How do you distinguish and differentiate when you're reading such text, ki, okay, this clearly is poetic liberty. I'm going to give you an example. So when Vyasa, who's the creator and the writer of this epic, decides to grant Sanjaya
Right.
the vision to see what is happening miles away, and then narrate the same to Dhritarashtra,
Right.
is this poetic liberty or some kind of science that doesn't even exist today? I mean, I really want to know how should I
Right.
approach it?
Right. Right. I think that that is not something that I worry too much about, to be honest with you. I don't feel that I need to know exactly in a very materialistic or rational sense um, whether that particular page is a direct transcription of quote unquote reality versus that other page is something that a poet made up versus this other page is something highly symbolic. That will drive you crazy. And basically what you will end up doing is simply dismissing everything that seems unlikely or improbable or supernatural, leaving a story that is significantly weaker. And similarly, I think that within the story itself, there is a suspension of disbelief, is what the traditional literary critical term is. There's a suspension of disbelief that takes place, and that takes place no matter what the story is. When someone is telling you a story that they made up, like if you're reading a novel, for example, there's when you are inside the story, you suspend your disbelief that, okay, somebody's making this up. Now, similarly, when you are in the epic, experiencing the epic, the best way to experience the epic is with that suspension of disbelief and having that particular rational mind or that skeptical mind that says, well, did that really happen? That couldn't have really happened. Maybe that happened, but I'm not sure. That mindset is actually taking you out of the epic, you know, and it's diminishing the power in real time. It's a drag. It's like draining bandwidth, right? It's like draining power from the light show, right? And so when I read the epic, when I write the epic, I'm completely in it. You know, I'm completely in it, and I don't feel the need to distinguish among those various elements that you mentioned. I
Because
just don't.
Because growing up in India, obviously we take a lot of pride in our history. We take a lot of pride because we as a nation have been subjugated for many years. We need some
Yeah.
brownie points. We need something to pull us back and say ki we were also great once, right?
Right.
So growing up, whenever there used to be any amazing scientific development or any new technology
Right.
globally, and all these majorly used to come from the West. India's counter, and what I have heard from my parents and a lot of people, they're like, son, do you know that in ancient India there was technologies wherein people could see things 1,000 miles
Mhm.
away, even when they are not present over there. So
Right.
this becomes problematic when you start taking these poetic liberties, or even if they're not poetic liberties, as proof of a geography's scientific prowess, and then
Mhm.
somewhere you become satisfied ki, yeah, we were good, man. Today if you're not doing anything great in science and technology, it's okay, this karma, this is cycle. Right now this is the era of West.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
why that's the
yeah,
problem. That's what I want to.
I understand. Yeah, I know where you're coming from, and I think that there is inevitably a certain amount of a feeling of being either inferior or eclipsed, and that leads to a certain amount of desire to thump your chest and say, "No, we were great, and here's proof of it, and here's this, and here's that." And maybe they'll even go into poetic texts or epic poems to try and find proof of that. So a couple of comments on that. One, Indians are not alone in this. Indians are not alone at all in this. It's a very commonplace thing among all of the various cultures that were caught wrong-footed by the rise of the West. It is important to remember that when we talk about cycles and we talk about peaks and things like that, it is true that different civilizations at various points throughout history have undergone abrupt and very impressive peaks. And in the case of Western Europe, it happened to have occurred relatively recently. And I think that we have seen the end of it. I think that the two world wars in the 20th century marked a sort of endpoint for that civilization's peak. Okay, but they did have a very impressive peak for many hundreds of years. They contributed immensely to the heritage of the human race and to the health of the human race. I mean, everything from antibiotics to vaccines to certain agricultural techniques and things like that. I mean, that is all to their credit. And maybe because I have grown up in the United States and I have a strong, connection to Western culture, I don't feel diminished in any way by acknowledging the glory that was old Europe or acknowledging the glory that was the West. And to a certain extent, America continues that in the fields of technology. We're talking over such a technology. Here's a phone, it's impressive stuff. Okay, it doesn't diminish us as Hindus or as Indians to say, bravo, you have done wonderful things. Now, secondly, Indians don't have to go to the epics to find evidence of their scientific and technological glory. All of that is in the literal historical record, whether that's the history of mathematics, the history of surgery, the history of medicine, the history of astronomy. Indians are among the crown jewels of human civilization, taken in the longest sense of the term. And we know this also not just by the testimony of Indians themselves, but we have numerous Greek texts where even the ancient Egyptians. So when Plato, the Greek philosopher, went to the ancient Egyptians to study, when Pythagoras went to the ancient Egyptians to study, so the ancient Greeks used to go to the ancient Egyptians as their great school. The ancient Egyptians said, we're actually a very, very recent culture. The true knowledge and wisdom we got taught by the Indians. All right, so it's something to be proud of, and that's not anything to be taken lightly. And so as far as the ancient mythological examples of things that sound a lot like nuclear weapons, that sound a lot like cell phones, that sound a lot like remote surveillance or things like that you were mentioning, it's important to realize that when it comes to modern technological inventions that have been realized by the West, the earliest imaginative examples we have are within the Indian tradition. You can't make something unless you imagine it first, right? Who was the first to imagine a lot of these things? Indians, actually, the Hindus, in our epics and in our mythology. Similarly, the truest and most, I don't want to say accurate, but the correct scale of human time, or sorry, of time, originates in ancient Hindu texts. Modern theoretical physics blows open the notion of the universe being 4,400 years old or whatever, is in the Bible or something like that, that was believed for hundreds of years in the West. Theoretical physics considers time on the scale that the ancient Hindus did, right? And this is, again, to imagine it, you imagine it thousands of years in advance of it becoming possible to realize, but the first to imagine it are definitely the Hindus, but I don't believe that they were the first to realize those things, meaning to make them real, to make them actually real. And I don't feel the need to make those claims in order to assuage a sense of inferiority, because I don't have a sense of inferiority. I would need to do that if I had an inferiority complex. I don't have an inferiority complex as a Hindu or as an Indian, not at all. And I feel that Indians, and I know what you're talking about. I think that the best way to overcome that inferiority complex is to educate ourselves about what we know to be the case about the glories of ancient Indian civilization, and then regard that as an inspiration to work now and into the future, and to build
That's
on the legacies and technologies and sciences of the West to continue to bring that to draw that forward, to send it forward.
so, Amit, what I, now another very, very important thing in continuation, not exactly in continuation, but again, something that I wanted to understand, which my logical brain couldn't wrap its head around it. Texts like Mahabharat and also Gita that I got to know by reading your book only, that
Oh, God song?
no, no, no.
Oh,
Yeah, no, not about that. But I'm going to say ki what I got to know by reading your book
yeah.
is that even texts like Mahabharata and Gita, they were transmitted verbally, like vocally. And Gita's philosophy was not something that was originally created by Krishna. He
Right.
states that it was by Ishwaku and then Manu and all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things. I was like, what? I thought that was Krishna's original philosophy. At the spur of the moment, he's like, I'm an avatar.
He even
I know the
quotes,
crux of
yeah.
matter. I'm gonna teach you ABCD.
No, he even quotes the Upanishads in some situations.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
directly quotes them. He draws images from the Upanishads, and I believe he there's even a chapter called Sankhya Yoga. So he
yeah,
recounts
yes,
Sankhya
yes.
philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, but then we'll come to that part as well. But these texts were always verbally transmitted.
Mhm.
Ramayana, Mahabharata, by the disciples of the creators, of the poets, right? I mean, what's these events happened many a thousand years ago.
Mhm.
The text that I have right now in my hand, that we are reading, that we are referring, and that we are creating, what's the guarantee that there was no adulteration, that there was no mixing up, there was no additions, there was no subtraction, because it was oral.
Right.
How can you even remember each and every syllable or punctuation or everything? That's what I want to understand. How is it?
Right.
Anybody would question the authenticity.
Sure, sure. So there's a couple things related to that. So within the vast number of Hindu texts that exist, or the Indian texts that exist, there are specifically the Vedas that have a specific tradition associated with them. And those are indeed micro-managed to the very nth degree, including things like, there's an entire technique to memorizing and reciting the Vedas, which is handed down through paramparas that date back to prehistory, basically. And I've actually looked into some of that stuff because I have some interest in that, in Sanskrit and things like that. And I started taking some online courses on it, and it was so too complex. It would have been, a full-time job to try and, because you have to be like, no, 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 no. You have to like have these special inflections and intonations and things like that. Those are the Vedas, all right? The Vedas, you can be 100% sure because there are people who devoted their lives to making sure that each and every syllable was exactly transmitted. Now, in the cases of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, this is not the case at all. The Uttarkand of the Ramayana was probably written by someone other than Valmiki, and it was added later, and it became part of the canonically understood Valmiki Ramayana. But it is, even if you read the original, even in translation, it's clearly written by someone else. It's just like not the same style. It's not the same quality. A lot of the events are sort of out of character for Rama. And that's incidentally the part where he exiles Sita when she's pregnant. All these things that are missing from certain versions of the Ramayana, but eventually it became part of it. Now there's no shaking it. You know what I'm saying? And so similarly, the Mahabharat's earliest, one of the earliest manuscripts is so old it's written in the Brahmi script, which is before Devanagari. There was the Brahmi script that was discovered along the Silk Road, in what is today the Xinjiang province of China. It was discovered by Germans, some German explorers in 1906, and they had a list among the various things in this manuscript, which was preserved by the dry climate of that part of the world from 130 AD. They had a list of the table of contents of the Mahabharata, And unlike the current one that has 18 Pandavas, it only had 16 Pandavas, you know? And the Mahabharata itself comes at the end of a process of growth of that epic. Initially, there's a core known as Jaya, which is about 8,800 verses. Over time, this became 100,000 verses. And it came to include a whole number of stories, treatises, dialogues, all sorts of different things, all sorts of backstories and later stories. And so the Mahabharata and Ramayana are not preserved with the intricacy and exactitude of the Vedas. They're not. There's no tradition, unbroken oral tradition of preservation. The earliest account of a recital of the Mahabharata is in the Mahabharata itself. It's not Vyasa, it's Vaishampayana, who is the disciple of Vyasa. Vyasa taught it to him, and then he is the one who recites it at a yagna that is, I believe, carried out by King Parikshit, who was, I think, the son of Abhimanyu, that is saved by Krishna posthumously. He was saved by Krishna from death in the womb. So anyway, that is so. This is so again. The Mahabharata and the Ramayana, are they adulterated? That's one way of looking at it. I think that term maybe sounds as though there was something
agenda or political agenda.
Yeah,
it could be possible.
Yeah, exactly. It implies that someone was trying to manipulate something to
Politically.
have a certain outcome.
Yeah.
When in reality, I think that it grew by accretion. I think that's the best way to think about it as far as the Mahabharata is concerned. I believe that it grew by accretion over a period of time. And that's basically how to look at it.
So Amit, now we did touch upon it, but I still want to ask a very direct question, and then we'll go into the characters. Do you think that Hindus today who do identify themselves as Hindus and who are inclined towards our ancient itihas and scriptures and textures should read Mahabharata? And if yes, then why? See, what I am asking is that I have a son who's 5 years of age. Okay. Now, my idea, when he comes into my mind, what comes into my head of how I want him to be when he grows up, there is no space for Mahabharata and Ramayana. Bear with me. I think, okay, I want him to be good in sports. I want him to cultivate the habit of reading. I really want him to understand technology. And I really want him to be creative. And I want these things, I want that I should be able to inculcate these things in him, and I'm going to make an effort to learn these things myself. If in the future he gets inclined towards reading these scriptures, good for him. Because I was not pushed by my parents to read Indian scriptures. I developed a love for reading, and I stumbled upon Indian history. Like with all my peers and friends, their parents never asked them to study Ramayana or Mahabharata. Their parents asked them to just follow the rituals and the puja. They never asked them to study it. So the questioning part was always missing. So what I want to ask you, as a Hindu, as my son who's 5 years age, he'll be 10, 15, 20.
Sure.
Should I, if I do ask him one day to do a deep study of these ancient texts, would it really benefit him?
You bring up some interesting points about the changing nature of society. But I would argue that the more things change, the more things stay the same, which is that throughout history, there have been forces at work that wish to turn us into pure consumers. They wish to turn us into automatons. They wish to turn us into empty vessels for whatever ideological nonsense they want to peddle in order to control you. They want to turn you into an empty vessel so that you constantly try and fill it with consumer goods, which makes them money. All right. And they want to untether you from your ancestors, untether you from religion, untether you from the past in order to control you and in order to exploit you. Okay? AI, technology, disruption, etc. What are they disrupting? They're disrupting your dhyan, your attention, right?
And deliberately.
And
Deliberately.
deliberate, absolutely deliberate. They want you to be a dopamine junkie on your social media feed. They want you to be in a state of constant low-level disruption so that the waters of your mind can never flatten out and then reflect the heavens. All right? Stirred up water does not reflect the clouds and the sun and the mountains. Stirred up water is only its own turbulence. That's all it is on its surface. So, what do you do in a situation like now where the forces of distraction and disruption have never been more powerful? All right. So what I'm saying is that what you're talking about is not new, but it's supercharged. Okay. The attempt to hollow you out, the attempt to disrupt your attention, and the attempt to distract you in a million directions at once has never been so powerful. The phone is why. The internet is why. And so then what can you do against that? Well, you need to connect yourself to the past and to your ancestors. You need to find something that you concentrate on. And you need to find something that deepens you and fills you up, right? The study of the ancient scriptures, in my experience, does all of those things. It connects me to my past, to a time, not just in the past, but also something that is permanent in a world where they are trying to distract you with transient stimuli. That stuff goes back 35, it goes back into prehistory. They didn't have history books written back then. It's that far back. Number two, it requires concentration, dhyan, right? Requires the monkey mind to sit down and concentrate in a way and at a depth that is different than what you get when you're scrolling on Twitter or you're scrolling on Facebook or scrolling on Instagram or whatever. That stuff is shallow. It looks like you're focused on something. You are the opposite of focused. You are being repeatedly distracted. Even the thing that you were looking at, you got distracted from by the immediately next one on the infinite scroll, on the infinite feed. And then as I said, it fills you up. It fills you with thoughts. It fills you with ideas. It fills you with stories. It fills you with something to meditate on. All right. This study of the ancient scripture does all that stuff. Could you find it somewhere else? You probably could. I mean, there are probably other things that you can do in order to have these meditation aids, in order to have these things that deepen you, in order to have these things that render you solid and immovable, right? I don't know anything as effective for me. You know, maybe someone else will have something else. That's what's proven effective for me. And so I can wholeheartedly recommend it to your son. I can wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone listening to this. And so that's what I would say is the main reason, because just as we were talking about fighting back, this is another way to fight back. This is another way to fight back. You have to know who you are. You have to know who you are.
That's a great thing that you said, Amit. I have never found or heard a very convincing answer to this question. And I ask this question to a lot of people who come on my podcast, who have written books around the same subject. I want to understand certain things about the characters and what they represented. Because unlike the Ramayana, wherein the protagonist was as they say, Maryada Purushottam, he was an idle man. He was more or less pious. He was more or less a one-woman man, very morally, very dharmic. He's going to follow the rules. He's going to follow the regulations. And his entire entourage, more or less like that. More or less, very pious people. Because it was based in an era which we called Satya Yuga, right? It was based in Satya Yuga. Coming to Mahabharata, what I have read and known is the characteristics of the Pandavas. It's not as if they are all pious. They have their shades of gray. They have their downfalls. Now, I want you to explain, I want to dissect one situation from the Mahabharata, which I find extremely. Okay, there are two situations that I want you to dissect. Let's get into it. One, when Arjuna goes to Swamvar and he wins over Draupadi in the competition, she becomes his lawfully wedded wife as per the rules of their Swamvar. He comes back in the exile. When they were exiled, he comes back to his mother, and she, even without looking at him, when he says ki, I have something for you, mother, and she's like, go divide them equally amongst all your brothers.
Yeah.
And the result is that Draupadi becomes wife, or becomes the wife to 5 men simultaneously. And I think that is when, and I think this is the reason I'm not able to wrap my head around this thing, Amit. Sometimes when I read, I'm like, is this possible?
Right.
It could have been possible. So what goes into my head, ki maybe in those time, what do you call this thing? Polygamy? I don't know.
Polyandry is what it's
Something
called.
like that. So maybe in those times it was okay for brothers to have a common wife or vice versa. So I want to first understand this part, that why was it accepted?
So the interesting thing is that this situation is fairly unique, and at the time also it is considered unusual. And so it was perhaps accepted insofar as it was, no one had the wherewithal or the power or influence to, go up against these five gentlemen and these 5 princes. It is something that is atypical insofar as it's not as though there are other examples of that scattered throughout the epics or the entire vast body of mythology. So remember, it's not just Mahabharata, Ramayana, it's also the Purans, which are numerous, and you just don't see this arrangement anywhere else. It's literally just Draupadi and the 5 Pandavas. Now, what is the reason behind it, or how does this come about? And in the original Mahabharata text that we have, it is portrayed as being just something that Kunti says, right, without looking, as you mentioned. So it's not as though she sees Draupadi and says, yeah, you're going to all have to marry her or something like that. No. She literally just says, okay, yeah, just divide it among your brothers. And then they take that literally, and they end up all basically rotating, being her husband on alternate days. And this is not particularly explained or gone into, at least in the texts that I've read, as to why this is the case, other than the idea that Draupadi is herself a somewhat exceptional or mystically inflected character. Okay, so her name is Krishna. So she has an obscure, and what I find very interesting is that it's never fully articulated.
Sorry, her name is Krishna?
Epic.
Her name is Krishna?
No, I'll talk about that in a moment. Her name is Krishna, and she has a mysterious relationship to Krishna, right?
Yeah.
And so their relationship is strangely like brother and sister, but at the same time, they have a sort of strange unity of nature. So
But which is platonic?
Oh, platonic. I don't mean that they are romantically involved. No. I mean that they are almost something beyond romance. They are almost like they're one figure. Okay.
Can we equate them to Ram and Sita?
No,
The
no, no,
Ram
no.
and
I
Sita
don't.
of Mahabharat?
Well, Ram and Sita are technically, the male and female consort,
Absolutely.
right?
From that
But
perspective,
I don't mean it like that. I don't mean that Draupadi is the Lakshmi equivalent to
ha.
Krishna's. No, 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 no.
Sure.
That's why I'm saying it is a mysterious and ambiguous connection that they have. It's not the straightforward, okay, Ram is Vishnu and Sita is Lakshmi. This is not how I mean this. I mean that they have the same name, the same way that Vyasa has the name Krishna also. And all three of them are extremely dark skinned. And the reason Draupadi is additionally interesting and additionally unique is that she's not actually born in a normal way. She emerges from a sacrificial fire, along with her twin brother, who is born at the same yagna. And so she emerges fully formed from the fire. She has a very strange color combination in Vyasa. Her skin is completely black and her hair is blue. And she is a very unique figure. She's not normal. She's not on the scale of normal for any of the beautiful people in that particular epic. She's distinctly described as being something almost supernatural. Okay. And I think that she was made, the narrator, or like the narrative, makes her the common wife of all five princes because she is basically the figure who is her beauty is the source of discord. Okay. Just as Helen of Troy's anomalous beauty leads to the Trojan War, Draupadi's beauty is so anomalous that it will eventually lead to war in whatever context she's placed into. And the only way to keep her from causing the Pandavas to fall out with one another is to marry her off to all five of them. And that in turn prevents them from fighting over her, and it unites them when she is violated by the Kauravas into basically requiring that particular war against the Kauravas. So again, this is an anomalous situation. It has certain narrative. It has a narrative imperative within it. It's necessitated by the narrative that it happened that way. And I think that by having Kunti not both order it and not order it, meaning she doesn't order it directly, but she orders it in a sort of unthinking way, the narrative manages to both have its way and sort of skirt any one person taking the blame for this sort of unusual and socially unprecedented arrangement.
Why I'm asking this question is because yesterday I was doing a recording with an individual who's written a book on J.C. Bose, Jagdish Chandra Bose. And we were talking about Indian history and politics and everything. And the question of Sita versus Draupadi came up. And his name is Sudipto. So Sudipto asked me, and we were discussing, he's like, Raghav, why do you think that Sita is addressed as Ma Sita?
Mm-hmm.
But Draupadi, who went through worse, is not acknowledged and not placed as the same pedestal as Sita was in the Ramayana. And I told Sudipto, I think it's because we couldn't digest the fact that here is a woman who slept with 5 men at different time. I was being very open. I mean, it is what it is. When you get married, you do have sex, right? And there are instances in the Mahabharata wherein, I mean, it's been written that Bhim was her favorite lover. He was very passionate and he was very fond of her. I mean, and I feel Mahabharata as a text is very sexually explicit. It's very open. It's very accepting. We all know how Pandavas were born. They were not the sons of Pandu. Right. On paper, they were sons of Pandu, but biologically, they were the product of 4 different demigods.
Right.
And we all know how biological children are born. It is because of the concept of mating. So,
Right.
two questions emerge, Amit. Do you feel that Draupadi should have been given more of a divine status as Sita? And do you also believe that that era and Mahabharat was a very sexually open and
Sure.
accepting of a
So,
society?
so, so to answer the questions in reverse, the Indian antiquity was very open about sexuality and the sexual act. I visited ancient temple ruins where, the pillars themselves are carved with,
Kujrao.
spiritual beings in the act of love making. The Mahabharata is very rather kind of like soft pedals it compared to Kalidasa.
Yes.
If you have the Kumar Sambhavam, I don't know if you've read that. There's extended divine sex scene. I mean, this is just how ancient Indians were. They did not demonize the sexual act. If anything, they found a way to render that too divine and something not to be ashamed of, not to be demonized, not to be rendered sort of perceived as being toxic or evil or shameful. This is just a characteristic of that particular civilization. Over time, I think with the arrival of Islam, the arrival of evangelical Christianity, Victorian era morals, India changed its attitude towards these things over the course of centuries. And that's just that sort of thing happens over time, and that's just how things are. Relative to the question of Draupadi or Sita, it is important, I think, to remember that there was never a push to deify Draupadi, just as there was never really a push to deify Yudhishthir, Bhim, Nakul, Sahadev, or Arjun. There was never any hint in the epics themselves that these characters are a place where the divine interpenetrates the world of men. For Krishna, that's not the case. Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, and there are numerous examples or references in the epic and in subsequent Purans or Harivansh and all these other different things that look, Krishna is a place where Vishnu enters the world and the affairs of men. Now, with the Ramayana, similarly, if you remember, I mentioned there was that point where Brahma and the gods tear open the sky and they berate Rama and they say, "Don't you know who you are?" And he says, "Well, I think I'm Rama, the son of Dasharath. You tell me who I am." And so then Brahma does. Brahma tells him who he is. He says, "You're an avatar of Vishnu, this, that, the other." But he also tells Rama who Sita is. All right. So even Valmiki's Ramayana makes leaves no doubt that not only is Rama Vishnu, Sita is also Lakshmi. Sita is his consort. She is an incarnation of the divine goddess. And so this was established at the very beginning for Sita. And it was never established for Draupadi at any point. And it wasn't as though the epic insists that, oh, Draupadi is a divine character, divine goddess. And then people or Hindus were like, oh, no, we're not going to. She had sex with men, or 5 men. We're not going to allow that to be to ever fly. There was never a twinkle in Vyasa's eye that she was a goddess incarnation. Was she some sort of mystical figure? Did she have some sort of supernatural element to her? Absolutely. But as I mentioned, the epic leaves it ambiguous. The epic does not theologically categorize her either as an Apsara or a Yakshi or a Devi or an incarnation of a Devi or anything like that. But she has something weird and mysterious about her, which gives her a special connection to Krishna, They're both two characters. They're two of the three characters who are anomalously dark skinned. Now remember, in the old days, dark skin in India was considered very beautiful. I've written a book about that. It's called Black Avatar,
Yeah.
other essays. But anyway, and back then that was considered the supremely beautiful color. And those three characters, Vyasa, the creator of the epic, and then Krishna and Krishna, they're visually anomalous to everyone else. They're visually set apart from all the other characters. And that's an important point, which is often under discussed because everyone refers to Krishna as Draupadi or Panchali, and then everyone refers to Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa as Vyasa, and they only refer to Krishna as Krishna. But really, there are three, Krishna characters in that epic.
Interesting. Amit, now the second incident or the scene from Mahabharat that again I'm not able to understand, and let's unravel it because it's very crucial and important, is the Vastra Haran scene, wherein they are gambling and in a fit of this thing, they must be drinking, they must be celebrating whilst they're playing the game. It's very normal. I mean, it's absolutely fine. They're kings. They have everything at their disposal, right? Now the Pandavas start losing everything. They start betting each and everything. They start losing everything till the point they bet their own wives. And they lose, not realizing that the game is rigged by the other party. For a group of men who are highly intellectual and intelligent to lose to lose this entire game of chess, shatranj, and also to not understand that it's been rigged, and then to place their wife in exchange for their, for if they lose, and then to see her get undressed in the sabha, in the court, with the king present, and the guards and the priests and everybody present. They do nothing. And it's eventually Krishna who comes up to rescue her. And that also indirectly. I mean, he does not come with a sari and ki main aapko bandta hu. Nahi.
Yeah.
It mystically appears.
Right.
For something that could have been controlled with the intervention of humans. Specifically, when the humans in question are 5 in number and you are their wife, there had to be a metaphysical element infused.
Right.
So this is again one thing that I want you to help me dissect. Were they intoxicated, or why did they not do anything about it? Because this is something which is crossing the line.
At that particular point in time, so remember, it is Yudhishthir playing the game, right? And Yudhishthir is at once the most pious of the brothers. He never tells a lie until one point later on in the war, where he tells a half lie. He is absolutely pious at all times. If he could have another different job, he would be a Brahmin, right? But he has one weakness, right? And that's gambling. Right? He has one weakness, and it's gambling. And insofar as he is the one playing gambling, unable to resist, constantly betting more, getting further and deeper in the hole, unable to stop playing, it's actually a very, very accurate psychological depiction of the gambling addiction, of the gambling addict. Okay? So let's set aside the fact that Yudhishthir gambles everything one after another. He is the one who gambles his own brothers. He gambles himself, and he loses them, and they are no longer their own masters at that point. There are two reasons why they don't do anything, even though basically there is a point where Bhim, he's a hot-headed guy, and he wants to do something, and he's looking over at his weapons because they don't have their weapons with them at the time. But there's a thought, hey, maybe I can go get my weapons and then kill all these people. You know what I'm saying? So there's two levels, in my opinion, as to their inaction. Okay. So point number one is that there are 5 of them, but remember, there are 100 Kauravas, right? And it's not as though it's just them five and then Shakuni and Duryodhana. No, no, no. It's them five, Shakuni, Duryodhana, and 99 other Kauravas. And then a few other people. Bhishma's there. All these other people are there. So in one sense, they are outnumbered profoundly. And we like to think that, oh, well, the five of them, they're so strong they could just engage in mass slaughter. But I believe that if we can visualize that scene, they have just been lost by their own brother. They are officially, according to the rules of the game, and according to the rules of how basically the rules of gambling, right? They are no longer autonomous beings, right? They're no longer autonomous people at that point. In the same way that there's an entire thing about how they have to be in exile for later on, when finally the arrangement occurs, they have to go into exile. Then they have a year where they have to be incognito and no one, they have to hide and protect, they have to basically be in disguise. And if they get found out again, they have, they have back to square one. All of these arcane rules are things that they follow because they lost in the gambling. And I think that their inaction, although it seems like unbearable, it's part and parcel of the nature of having lost, that you have to kind of regard that as, okay, I lost it. I lost fair and square, and now I'm stuck. But there's a deeper reason, and I think that no matter how you can find different reasons, I think, within the narrative itself as to why they did not do anything at that particular time. But in a deeper sense, every epic hero, every epic story involves going down to rock bottom and then finding your way back up, going down to the underworld and then finding your way back to the light. And that moment in the gambling hall for the five Pandavas, you have to realize that it comes immediately after Yudhishthir has built this great, massive hall in Indraprastha. They have established a rival capital. Yudhishthir has sent his brothers out, and they've just gotten back from having conquered the four directions. Okay? At this moment, the Pandavas are at the top of the world. They are above Hastinapur. They are more glorious than any kings in the history of Bharat. Okay? The glory has shifted to that branch of the family and to these five brothers. They're at the pinnacle. Now, for the rest of the epic to occur, they have to be brought down. Not just brought down to the level of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, but brought down all the way to basically a level of contemptibility. Because they're held in contempt not just by their enemies, but by themselves. By Draupadi herself. She, after all this happens, she lays into them. They are in a state of absolute shame and contemptibility after having risen that high. And they are dropped down to the absolute bottom, especially for a Kshatriya, right? And their notions of pride, their notions of the patriarchal possessiveness of the woman. So at that point, not only have they been stripped of all their worldly possessions, they've been stripped of their honor. And this is necessary to break them completely down so that they can, through war, through mass slaughter, through the vengeance carried out on Duryodhana, Karna, all the Kauravas, they can redeem themselves and avenge, not just avenge Draupadi, but avenge the dishonor basically meted out on Draupadi and on them. And they can basically become men again. And so they do nothing at that moment because they are emasculated. They are emasculated. At one point later on, Arjuna is literally emasculated for a year,
Yeah.
and it's on the basis of a curse. But that is a symbolic, or sorry, that is like the sort of physical correlative of what happens to the five Pandavas at that moment in the
Is it
gambling.
is it also an example of the workings of the human psychology?
Right.
That this is how the human psychology works. When you're emasculated, you sometimes can go into a state of inactivity wherein you do not know what to do. You freeze.
Absolutely.
You're like like this.
It's fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
Those are the three options. They
Yeah.
didn't fight, they didn't run away, they froze.
They froze.
You know?
They couldn't understand what is happening. Maybe it happened so fast. Maybe they got confused.
Right.
A lot of factors that can come into play over here, and even the greatest of men couldn't know
Right.
what they do. Yeah, because all these incidents that I am pinpointing are the ones wherein the epics and the people are criticized. Just like Ram is criticized for leaving Sita. Ram is criticized that she was pregnant, you left her, didn't even bother, and when she wanted to come back after Lanka, and he's like, you have to give an Agni Pariksha. Till date there are debates online. Till date, it's
But
huge.
remember, all those critiques of the characters and of those decisions happen within the epic themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It did.
Not as though when we critique the Pandavas for sitting around during the Vastraharan, Draupadi does the same thing to them.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. To
All the
Karna.
other characters.
Yeah.
And then the Pandavas do the same thing to themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, how could we possibly have done nothing?
Yeah.
Like all of this is
Self-criticized.
Yeah. All this is. There's nothing new about this. There's nothing irreverent about it. There's nothing inappropriate or irreligious about it. That's literally embedded in the epics themselves. And I think that we have to be careful as a culture not to confuse these characters as being infallible, like this, the prophet can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Similarly, Rama can do no wrong. Yudhishthir can do no wrong. Like, this is not how those characters were designed. That it would be a very uninteresting epic if Rama never made a mistake. Similarly, Sita, she's perfect the whole time, but then at one point she really, really wants a golden deer, and she really, really insists that, oh no, you go after him. Okay, fine, now you go after Rama. Even though everyone's like, don't do this, we shouldn't do this, this is a terrible idea, she insists. She throws a tantrum. She says, I'll tell Rama you tried to get with me, so get out there or I'm going to lie about you. All of these things is completely out of character, right? But it's human, and it propels the epic forward. And similarly, I think the gambling scene, it's very psychologically real, it's psychologically believable, and it really sets the epic's main action into motion.
Because Amit, I think even the creators and the writers of these epics are very clear about one thing, that if we portray these protagonists and characters as flawless men and women, there would be no learning for people. Because you'll be like, how can we try to be like someone who's perfect, or who's a god, or who's a demigod? The problem I feel is, I've read this line somewhere, the biggest disservice you can do to a great man is to make him into a god. Because then whatever he or she stood for gets into the ashes, because you're like, if he's Vishnu's avatar, I can never be like him. Because I'm a human.
Well, he himself was. Avatars are human, right? Avatars are human.
And yeah, because the concept that is associated with being an avatar is that you can't do anything wrong. You touch this thing, it will turn into gold. That's when the problem comes up. You have to see
that doesn't have as much basis, I think, in our tradition. It's something that's sort of come up later.
Yeah, in the Bhakti movement. It came with the Bhakti movement, specifically with Tulsidas.
Tulsidas's Ramayana is very different. His Rama is very different.
Yeah, his Rama is not what Valmiki's Rama was. Yeah, that's the thing. Amit, now, the third act. We have discussed the two main acts, not main, but controversial and important. I want to come to the act of Gita also. But before that, as we were discussing on phone, I'm going to ask a very short and a direct question. Who is Krishna? I mean, I want you to tell the viewers about that man, that beautiful, complicated man. Because why I'm calling him beautiful, why I'm calling him complicate, because that's a potent combination. I look at Krishna and in my head there is an image of Shah Rukh Khan, greater than life, businessman, romantic, intelligent, king. He can do anything. He can act, he can dance, he can do business. He has the aura, he has the personality, he carries himself. He is the king. So,
Right.
Amit, help us understand the character of Krishna, and why he is such a pivotal individual in this entire ecosystem.
It's a very tall order because it's kind of like saying, help us understand God,
Yeah, absolutely.
help us
But he
understand.
was in front of us as a human being, so I have all the right to dissect him.
Right, no, absolutely. But even his nature is so complex, and it has changed over time as well. And it's very interesting to me to see the earliest portrayals of Krishna in the epic as someone who is very at once um, a combination of worldly shrewdness and otherworldly wisdom, right? And then over time, the youth of Krishna becomes foregrounded, and that is a younger Krishna who is very much into art, poetry, dancing, music, beauty, all the joy of youth and love. That's the Geet Govindam, Jayadev, the Bhakti movement, and you have almost these two Krishnas. And what's interesting is that the that Bhakti movement, beautiful musical Krishna, is largely missing from Vyasa's epic, if
Thank
you
you
go
for
to that.
saying that. First of all, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we talk about the Krishna of the Mahabharata, he is introduced into the epic as a grown man, and so a lot of his I mean there is obviously some recounting of his birth and everything like that, but the Vrindavan Krishna, Bal Krishna, all of that is not foregrounded in the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, we get a character who is highly revered by everyone around him. They know that here is something special. Here is someone unique. He has a certain he does have aura, I guess is the word you used. He definitely has aura. He definitely has a worldly mindset where he is very intricately and intimately involved in the political dealings of the Pandavas. He is not above any of that. He is not detached from that. Later in the Gita, he advocates detachment, but it is in the context of, okay, be detached from it, but do the thing you need to do in the world. And I think that in the Mahabharata itself, his his ultimate role and meaning is to be precisely what I just said earlier. How to combine or have the divine and otherworldly and sublime aspects of your being coexist with worldly duties and the nitty gritty of politics and fighting in the arena of history. This is ultimately what the Gita tries to reconcile, these two tendencies in the heart of man. One, to go off to the mountain, study, the grand scriptures and the grand traditions, meditate, and be away from it all. And the other tendency to get your hands dirty, if necessary, get your hands bloody, and fight the good fight. All right. And so Arjuna, at the moment of his despair, requires Krishna to explain to him how it is possible to be both a yogi and a kshatriya, to be both a fighter and a man of religion, as it were, a man of dharma. And the Gita is the best, to my mind, the best explanation of that, the best example of that. Krishna is the best example of that, and the Gita is the ultimate expression of that we have. It's why I chose to translate it back in 2018, and why I wrote a commentary on it. I could write another commentary on it even now, and I think that it's truly an infinite work. And I think that Krishna is, and we can go into the other Krishna, the non-Mahabharat Krishna, and what that role is. But I think that as far as the Mahabharata is concerned, that is the character of Krishna.
Do you think that Krishna as an individual and a character, and I'm talking about the Krishna of Mahabharat, single-handedly drove the entire narrative of the war? As in, he orchestrated the entire war. He controlled war up to such an extent that he made it happen the way he wanted things to happen. It was as if he was playing a play wherein he knew what is supposed to happen and he orchestrated it, everything.
Yeah. So I feel that because in the largest sense of the words of the word, all of that had happened before already. It happened numerous times in various cycles of existence. And in that sense, Krishna was already aware of that there would be a war. At one point, Draupadi, right after the Vastraharan, and they're in exile, Krishna goes and meets Draupadi, and they have a brief discussion where she says, I want there to be a war. And he says, look, there is going to be a war. There is going to be a war. But it's my dharma to do everything I can to stop it. And I find it very interesting that Krishna he moves heaven and earth to try and stop the war. Even though in all the different kalpas, all the different cycles of existence, the Pandavas and Kauravas have fought at the inflection point and ushered in the Kali Yuga every time. Every time Krishna has done what he knew was right in trying to stop it from happening. And every time Duryodhana tries to arrest him over and over again, and Krishna shows him his true nature. A lot of people forget this. Arjuna was not the only one who was shown Krishna's true nature. Duryodhana was shown it when he goes to arrest Krishna. The way Krishna gets out is he shows him his true nature. Duryodhana sees it, doesn't see it. It's as good as if he hadn't seen it. He's unimpressed because it's all about the recipient, right? He's closed off. Now, as far as everything being scripted, as far as Krishna bringing it about, I think the argument could be made that he tries to prevent it on more than one occasion. He tries to stop that bloodshed, tries to have the preset course of history to leave the old rut, the wheels of time, the wheel of time to leave its rut as it goes on its circular course from kalpa to kalpa. But every time the war happens, every time he has to do what he has to do, and he plays it out the way he has to play it out. I feel that he intervened in various ways along the way in order to make sure that the outcome happened the way he needed the outcome to happen. That much is clear from the text and from how things play out. He's very clever about how he goes about it. He makes it so that sometimes that will reveal the character of the people involved. So when Arjuna and Duryodhana come to him, they both want his assistance in the war. He allows Arjuna to pick first. Do you want my army or do you want me? This is a question that's very important. Both of them get what they want. When Duryodhana hears Arjuna pick Krishna and give up the Narayani Sena, which is this massive military force that Krishna has, Duryodhana's very happy. because he doesn't understand, right? He doesn't. That's that's his character. His character is revealed in that moment, and I think that do we say that Krishna scripted everything? No, I think that the individual characters scripted their own roles in it, but he was the impetus that allowed them to express their own characters. Arjuna, which do you want? Do you want me or do you want my army? Pick. If he had asked Duryodhana first, Duryodhana would have said, "I want your army. You can go out. You can go off with them. I want you. I want that army." You know what I'm saying? But and so that's how I think it is. I think everyone in that epic, including Yudhishthir at the gambling table, etc., all those characters, they were living out their own nature and they were expressing their own nature in their actions.
Did Vedvya explicitly mention about the divinity of Krishna? Is it there that, or is there a clear acknowledgement of the fact that this individual is divine?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's in the Gita, right?
We are coming to the conclusion of this entire podcast with a very, very, very important act of Mahabharata, and that is the birth of Gita, inception of Gita. Now, this is very fascinating. You have an individual who's giving a lecture in a way. I'm just trying to understand from a very layman's perspective. An individual who's giving a lecture in philosophy to a warrior in the middle of the war, when the warrior starts to question his own duty and says that I don't want to fight my enemies. So you have a warrior who's refusing to fight. You have a battleground wherein people are about to kill each other. And then you have this individual who's lecturing philosophy. I mean, this is a very weird and a unique combination, right? So I'm going to divide this entire Gita act into two parts. Okay, let's start with why did Krishna give this philosophy of Gita to Arjun? What makes Arjun so special? And B, what is the core philosophy of Gita?
So I think the core philosophy of the Gita is not just one thing. I think that when Arjuna is in a state of despair, he doesn't want to, carry out his dharma as a kshatriya on that battlefield for a variety of reasons. The overall Gita is there. Its role in the narrative is to energize him, galvanize him, to pick up his weapons again and fight. But the Gita itself is something that has multiple different through lines or elements in the different chapters that it talks about. So among those things, it includes the theory of the three gunas, right, which is a theory of human psychology. It includes some statements and discussions related to the nature of the steady mystic, the yogi, Sthita Prajna, and what that entails as far as how you approach life, how you perceive life, how you think of your environment and everything like that. And it also has to do with the divine and demonic natures. It has to do with the nature of the Atma and Brahman, meaning, the self that is in all different living beings, and then how that self from birth to birth transfigures itself until it attains nirvana and becomes part of Brahman and sort of merges into Brahman. All of those things are in the Gita at different points, and some are returned to. I think the three guna theory is something that Krishna returns to repeatedly. One of the longest chapters has to do with how different foods and different behaviors and different things are classified according to the guna theory. And so there's not just one core philosophy of the Gita. The Gita is a summary of numerous schools of thought, including Sankhya, and including Advaita, in the history of Indian philosophy. And it also talks about the various forms of yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga,
Bhakti
bhakti.
yoga.
And so, and it also ranks these according to difficulty, and it encourages Arjuna to to pursue each one of them, but also it talks about how bhakti yoga is the easiest and the fastest. And so all of those things are part of the Gita. And so there's not a single answer to what is the core philosophy of the Gita. The good thing is that the Gita is actually not that long as far as holy books are concerned. And you can read it once, you can read it twice, you can read it 3, 4, a dozen times over the next few years, and you'll get something more out of it because it's so dense and it's such a perfect, streamlined summary of so much, you know? Now, as far as Krishna's relationship to Arjuna, they do have some degree of blood relationship or blood kinship. They're cousins, you could consider it. But deeper than that relationship, and because they probably had so many cousins and siblings and this and that. Deeper than that relationship is friendship. Is friendship, and I think that Krishna and Arjuna represent one of the most profound and beautiful friendships in in all of literature, in all of religion, really. And I think that just to dwell a moment on the nature of friendship, you know, friendship is really one of the purest forms of relationship that human beings can have. And it's because if you think about it, it's purely elective, right? You, you can either, people aren't friends with people that they don't want to be friends with. If you're best friends with someone, that's something that you were mutually elected, you mutually elected to be best friends, right? The second thing is, for the most part, if you're truly best friends with somebody, you don't really have anything to gain from them. Even from your wife or your girlfriend or your lover or something, you in the end have this pleasure that you gain from them every time, you're together. You have this physical pleasure, this real live physical pleasure. But if it's just you and your best friend, there's nothing, you don't have anything to gain from that, right? And you don't have that physical connection to gain. It's purely something at the level of the soul. And I think the French philosopher Montaigne, he once wrote about when he lost one of his dearest friend. He said, why were we friends? Well, because he was he and because I was I.
Beautiful.
And that summarizes friendship so profoundly. And if you think about the ultimate and most beautiful and selfless possible relationship you could have to God, to the divine, because because Krishna was Krishna and because I was I, right? Because God was God and I was I. And I don't have anything to gain from being, from having this relationship with God. I don't get physical pleasure out of it. I don't get fame and fortune out of it. I don't get anything, material out of it. But it nourishes me, it elevates me, it quickens my mind, it quickens my intellect, right? And I think that that is why Krishna imparts this to Arjuna. And there's this beautiful point where right after he's shown him the universal form, the Vishvarupa Darshanam, Arjuna says, I need you to forgive me if, I've joked around with you when we're just laying around after we've eaten, or if we're, just, if I've just called you something familiar like, hey, buddy, or, hey, Krishna, and I've disrespected you in that way, forgive me. And it gives you a little peek into their day-to-day familiarity that they had as buddies, as just best friends. And I think that's one of the sweetest little moments in the Gita. because it's so personal, and it gives you that insight into the nature of their relationship before Kurukshetra, before that the Gita was delivered. and it makes you realize that, you know, at that moment when Arjuna sees who Krishna really is, he realizes that this friend that he's had and that he's been so familiar with was really something tremendous and cosmic. And I think that ultimately Krishna showed him that and gave him a divine eye so that he could see what he was being shown. Took that time to distill the entirety of Indian philosophy to date and into the future, really, because the Bhakti movement has its seeds in Krishna talking about Bhakti in the Gita.
Yeah.
He takes the entirety of dharmic philosophy, distills it for his friend and for us ultimately, because of that friendship, because he was he and Arjuna was Arjuna, and there's nothing more beautiful than that.
Wow, what an answer. What a way to describe Amit. Hats off. Beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, wow. The purity. Yeah. I could actually, when you were narrating, I could feel the purity that would have existed, or that existed, between Krishna and Arjuna. You could feel the love that he had for him, Krishna.
Yeah. Because it was friendship.
Yeah, to distill in the battlefield, amidst, between the battlefield, to distill all that knowledge and concisely to give him, just to help him out. Yeah. He could have told him, dude, if he's not going to fight, he's going to kill your wife and kids. Full stop. Yeah. Or had there been a liquor store, he's like, drink a couple of beers and just let's do it. No. Yeah. He did what a true friend should. He cleared his fundamentals.
Right.
His fundamentals.
Get your head right.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you get.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. That's beautiful. With this, Amit, we come to the end of this conversation.
Great talk.
I hope you enjoyed it, because I really wanted people to.
No, it was awesome.
Really wanted people to, because people are familiar with the story, but I wanted people to also understand the psychology of events, of people, of various elements that is associated with this epic, so that there is some deep level of. And I also wanted to, let people know that it is very important for you to ask questions. Don't just, accept things just because it is aligned with a particular religion. Be open, have inquiry, ask questions. You might find answers that can help you in your today's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So Amit, thank you so much. It was truly an honor to have you with us.